Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think we mostly have folks who we know well already on this workshop, but in case we don't, my name is Sharon Goodson, and I'm happy to be presenting this workshop with Jeannie Schmelzer, who's a great friend and colleague in the fundraising world. And we'll do introductions more the next slide, but just as a quick overview, this actually is one of my favorite workshops to present because it's all about strengthening relationships. And, I just think it's a lot of fun. So a couple of logistics. This will probably run an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how many questions folks have, but we're happy to answer those. We can stop during the workshop if you have a question and you just want to, put a note in the chat. And or have questions at the end. So we'll kind of roll along and we'll, I'm sure, ask for questions at a couple different points as well. As you see, we are recording and we are, and so we will upload that link to YouTube and we will send out the link and also the slides for the workshop probably tomorrow. And then I think most of the organizations are involved in San Diego Gives. So these will, and even if you're not, the sort of longtime home of the recording and the slides will be on the San Diego Gives University website page, as have all of the others, which in case you haven't seen, there's a lot of great stuff there. And particularly a lot of the questions that we're getting now are around marketing, and we have a couple of really good workshops that have addressed marketing that you can kind of watch or scan through at your leisure. Oh, thank you so much. Lauren is putting in the chat. Wow, great, the link to that. So so we have that, and trying to think if there's any other sort of logistics. I don't think so. I will go to the next slide. So I work, as I mentioned, for the Leach-Tag Foundation. I'm the Vice President of Philanthropy here. I've been here 12 and a half years. And in addition to the grant making that we do and the programs that we do, which are a lot of our portfolio, I also do a lot of fundraising because our we fundraise for the initiatives that we support, not with funding coming to the Leach-Tag Foundation, but really supporting overall efforts that go to nonprofits. So kept my hand in this for a long time. And Jeannie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Great to see all of you. I'm an executive vice president with Netzel Grigsby and Associates. Netzel Grigsby and Associates is a development firm. We've been in business 37 years. And our theme or our logo is "Your vision is our mission." We help nonprofits realize their greatest potential in philanthropy by various services, which you can look up on our website. I've been with Netzel Grigsby 25 years. And before that, I worked for the United Way of Silicon Valley. And before that, the San Diego YMCA Association for 15 years. And I am so pleased to see so many people that I know on the screen and some new people, and look forward to sharing with you what we know about donor retention and how to keep donors, and also hear all your questions and perhaps some new information from you.
Yes, so, for sure. That's right.
Great to see all of you.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Yeah, we never want to take for granted that we have all the answers at all. We know that there is a lot of wisdom in the group, and that makes it a lot of fun as well. And I did want to thank also Jeannie and Netzel Grigsby for being sponsors of San Diego Gives, which is how this workshop, we've done this together before, just, for the Hive and for, for fun. But this particular one came out of our curriculum for San Diego Gives University. So thank you so much, Jeannie,
for welcome
helping us with that. So our objectives this morning are, I'll kind of go through them, and basically these are things that probably a lot of us have talked about, in the past, but, and the question that I think we often are scratching our heads about is like, why do we lose money? And lose donors, and how do we keep them, happy? How do we keep them engaged? What kind of plan should we be creating? And it's one thing to create a plan. I know I've done this myself, and then great, it sits in my drawer or, in a, on my laptop filed away. And then, but really, how do we implement it? So we're really going to look at some very, tangible ways that we're going to, build these opportunities, to really enhance donor relationships, win back donors who have lapsed, and, really keep them very much engaged. In terms of San Diego Gives, the organizations participating will receive the list of donors through the Mighty Cause platform with some contact information also. And so the whole, in addition to it being a great fundraising and capacity building project, one of the big reasons that we're doing San Diego Gives is really to help engage your current donors and bring in new donors. So as we go through a lot of the points today, to maybe have San Diego Gives in the background. And for those of you who might be joining us who are not involved with San Diego Gives, this is a 6-month nonprofit capacity and donor education program that culminates in a big crowdfunding campaign that has already launched, but its big day of giving is September 8th. So the goal with San Diego Gives is for us to have as many as 4,000 total donors supporting our 327 nonprofits. We'll see how that goes, but we're also hoping that for that donor number, that we're going to have 40% of those will be new donors to organizations. So that said, what happens? We do all of this work, it's a big flurry of activity. Now, how do you cultivate these donor relationships so that they move from being, part of a crowdfunding campaign to, more integrated into your work and hopefully move up that donor pyramid? Now over to Jeannie.
So part of your plan should be, what is your donor retention and how do you figure that out? And do you know it? As well as donor retention, we want to see what donors are not returning and perhaps why. But the formula, that's okay, we'll go back. The formula for figuring this out, you may already know this, is that the number of donors that continue to give after their first contribution is what your donor retention would be. And if you look back at 2020 and know the number of donors that you had that year, and then you look at 21 and figure in the returning donors times 100 divided by your previous year donors, it will come up with what your donor retention is for the year. And just so I did a little configuration myself, if I had 500 returning donors from the previous year's 750, and I took that 500 towards 100, that's 50,000 divided by 750, I would come up with 75% of the, 66% donor retention. And you can do this also with, if you want to go to the next slide, just to show you the averages of, this was from 2021 donor retention giving year statistics of the average, so to speak. So new donors, never that gave before, 18.6%. Repeat donors, in other words, people that are continuing, or donor retention, was 60.7%, which is what we should strive for. And they're recaptured. People who have not given last year, but have given in the past, is 20%. So these are the average rates. But I think the most important thing for you to do is to figure this out in terms of new, repeat, and recaptured. So you're well aware of what your donor retention is and where you need to work on for the future. You probably already know, but it costs a lot more money to get a new donor than it does to have a retained donor, to keep that donor year after year. And also you should know that, and here's the cost, 5 to 10% times as much to solicit a new, it says customer or potential donor, as to work with an existing one. And the reason for that is how much effort we put into the cost of direct mail, letters, advertising, events, everything that costs you to bring in someone new, it costs you that much more money than it does to keep the donor. And if you go back to the last slide, Sharon, just a minute, it's important for you not only to know these things, but consistently look at it year after year. In fact, some groups do it quarterly, some do it even monthly, to see how they're doing from month to month in terms of retaining their donors. And as we all know, in the retention of donors, those donors who give at least 3 to 4 years in a row are more likely to give to a major gift initiative or more likely to give to a capital campaign, because consistency in donations usually has more engagement. People are more likely to give to a larger goal amount, and they're more likely to be invested in the organization based on their, not only their giving, but also their engagement as either volunteers or coming to repeat events. You can go forward now. If you go back to this slide, yeah, thank you. If you figure out your cost for soliciting a new donor by looking at things like your direct mail costs and how many new donors you actually give, looking at the times that you meet with new donors, advertising, events that you have consistently. Some groups have an event every month, just to bring in new donors, to talk to them, the time that the staff is working on that event, as well as the time to put out the information. And I think the printing, if you're using printed materials, also there's a cost involved with how you're doing social media or how you're pushing your messaging out. So if you focus on the current donors as opposed to spending more and more money trying to get new donors, I think you'll see a return on your investment. And I think the next slide, we turn it over to Sharon.
Yes, great. So now we're going to talk about the reasons that donors stay and follow with the reasons that they leave. So I should say too that the research for this workshop came out of the annual giving study that Jeannie, help me. It's the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Indiana University is.
Yes.
And, okay, the two, they've been doing this giving study for, gosh, at least 20 years. And it's a great thing to keep an eye on. That's where we found the percentages of donor retention. And they're often doing, this research. So anyway, just so you didn't think that we necessarily made this up, although you probably could come up with a list also. But this is actually in priority order. So the number one reason that donors stay is they trust the organization and they believe that their donation is going to make a difference. It's all about trust, and it's, and that trust really comes from personal relationships. Do you do what you say when you say you're going to do it? Do you follow up? Are there, active communications? Are there touchstones with donors, on regular basis? And again, what I'm going to be sharing are kind of like the best of all possible scenarios. Nobody is perfect at all. And, but it's just trying to make sure that, we have an eye on that we're not sort of forgetting somebody. And the only time that we're communicating is the time of year that we want a donation. But also really making sure too, that in your messaging that you are instilling a lot of trust, your financials. If you get, a high rating on, for Charity Navigator or GuideStar, those kinds of things, more and more donors are looking at those tools. And, while my feeling, they're fine, they're great, but they're certainly not the whole story. And, it doesn't really give you the lens into, leadership and other things like that a relationship would. But trust is paramount. Next, of course, the donor is passionate about your cause and mission, that there is something in, either their background or people who they know. They have some sort of an emotional connection with what you do. And if you tap into that, you will, can lead to a lot of success. And that's why often, like a quote that I really like is, listen your way to a gift, where, if you spend time with donors and that, you just hear what are their stories. And I guess going back to San Diego Gives, if they are, they're giving to your cause, a great follow-up could be afterwards, we saw, in addition to the thank you that you will, that you're sending them automatically, but what prompted you to pick us? What was that? And then really hearing about what that connection, also that they feel appreciated, and they feel confident, in your work, that they feel that they make a difference. And this matters more or less to different clients, but it shouldn't go unacknowledged. They're also very much influenced by their peers. So that's why, these peer giving circles, one of the best, most effective ways of donor prospecting is to ask for referrals from your current donors, and ask them, who of their peers, might have an interest in a passion and the resources to participate, to join you. And then the last, of course, tax benefits, where, that is a reality, and you want to make sure there's a tax acknowledgement there, but often, a big piece is, for larger gifts, when, particularly when there's a taxable event, and you want to make sure that you're making those benefits really well known to folks.
Sharon, I'll just add, the trust issue, it's number one because it is number one. But I think that the consistency of what you do and the clarity of what you do helps someone trust you more. And over all of this, what I hear most donors say when they don't stay is that we were not asked. It was an expectation that we would give from a letter or an email, but the donor was saying we really aren't asked on a regular basis by someone we know, a relationship that we have. So I think that, these all factor in together, but influenced by their peers, also influenced by the relationship that you have with the donor. Mm-hmm. And the closer you are with the donor, the more convinced they will be that they will give, but you need to ask. Exactly. So I just wanted to add that because that's the number one reason why people actually give. Absolutely. And stay. They have to be asked.
Absolutely. Right. We do take it for granted that they'll be there next time. Yeah, I of course agree 100%. So let's move on to the next, which are the top reasons out of this research that donors leave. So first, they think the organization doesn't need their help. They think that, and this ties, I think, a lot to the fourth bullet of other groups are more deserving. That there are, often you have donors where, they're looking for the highest and best use of their resources. And so, sometimes, within, their passion area, et cetera. And this we saw a lot during COVID, right? Is that, particularly in the early days of COVID, where it was really all about, basic needs and frontline organizations, we saw a lot of giving kind of shift to that way. And, but I think, the most important part of this, of the first point is the organization doesn't need them. So, where I've seen this go a little bit, south for nonprofits is that, donors may see how much they raise, in a given year, and they have a high amount of resources in reserves. And it's really important to share your success in these ways, but you need to make sure it's balanced with what are the current issues you're still addressing and why those are still critical. Because chances are, if they think you don't need it, but for sure you do, it could very much be an issue of messaging. The fact that donors don't feel appreciated. you know, sending a thank you note, and of course, back to San Diego Gives, but you know, I would just really encourage everybody working in that project that to not stop with the automatic thank you that the donors receive, even if you don't do it right away, as best as you can, you know, follow up with some other kind of acknowledgement as well. Being really clear about how the money was used, you know, rather than just saying thank you is great, but it doesn't go far enough. You know, you really want to be making sure that the donor understands, you know, sort of the quantifiable impact of what what their gift resulted in. So, you know, to make it like very easy, you know, 100 school-age children were provided with lunches for the school year, you know, as a way as you can, you know, turn these into numbers, all the better. I know that's hard. And I know from all my years of experience that often can be kind of the tension sometimes between, you know, fundraising colleagues and program colleagues and things like that. But if you ever wanted to dig into that a little bit more, if you have trouble with that, I'm happy to help you. And I know Jeannie is too, although she's super busy right now. So we don't want to ask for too much there. But anyway, it's an important one. And again, with the San Diego Gives project, you do have, for those of you who are indicating on the, you know, in the campaign that there's a particular project that you're raising funds for, then great, you report back on those. If it's for general support, which is completely fine, then you're going to report back on the other. But you just want to try to keep the conversation going with those specifics. And the last is that, you know, donors can no longer afford this. So now, you know, this, you could see this bullet and you could be like, okay, that's good, done. But I read some really interesting articles, and I think Jeannie would probably have more to share on this too, is that just because donors might not be able to afford a gift now, doesn't mean that that will be their financial situation forever, you know, going forward. It also doesn't mean that they can't help you in other ways, you know, such as making introductions, volunteering, helping, you know, well, volunteering kind of covers that, you know, serving on a board or a committee. If they've been giving to you, they're so invested in you, and that investment transcends just the dollars that they provide.
Oftentimes, when they can no longer afford for whatever reason, we stop communicating with them because they're not giving. And I think that the communication is really important to continue, regardless that they're not giving. And as Sharon said, there are other things they can do. I think most importantly would be to offer them to be on a committee or to volunteer, but and listen and hear them out. I'm going to be talking about, you know, listening skills are so important, and it could be that they can no longer afford it because something drastic has happened in their family life. And just by listening to them will engage them into your organization and make them feel like they've been heard, that they've been appreciated for their past giving, even though they can't give right now. So it's important to stay in touch with them. It's kind of the stewardship factor that we need to keep stewarding even past donors, even though it's not going to see a return on our investment, maybe in our time with the organization, but it may in the future. And they could be a person that at the end of their life, they do have money saved that they will contribute to a legacy or, you know, a planned gift, but they can't give now. You see that a lot with retirees now, where they're worried that they're not going to have enough money to live on. But at the end of the day, they do end up with money, and they do end up giving it to organizations, and you don't really expect it. But again, the legacy is there.
No, I think that's a really good point. And one other thought that I was going to share there. Just think for 1 second. I lost it. Okay, well, I'll bring it back some point. Okay, so I'm going to the next slide has us sharing your own experiences working with donors. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and until we have, you know, sort of this brief, rather than tell us in the chat, because we don't we have a small enough group, I think, that is on this. So for folks who might want to share what you've done in terms of donor engagement and retention, that might correspond with one of these points. Nobody. You just want, that's okay. You don't have to do it.
Liza has her hand up, and so does Desiree.
Okay, go ahead, Liza, you go first.
So one of the things that we've been doing to show appreciation is sending out like handwritten thank you notes for like after we have a campaign. And we get a lot of good response because people feel appreciated and they, get a feel for how their gift has made an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the number one thing that I keep hearing consistently, that those handwritten notes are so appreciated, particularly about, I want to say, the 40-somethings and older, but I've even heard from younger people. And I've noticed that the people that I've talked to give them some advice or input on something, that they send me a handwritten note. And I have to say that it's very greatly appreciated. And you think twice then about whether or not, when you're giving your money, how you want to give it. And I think that helps raise the bar for your organization. So thank you, Liza, for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It also sets you apart, right? Because, donors are often giving to more than one organization. The average, is like 6 or 8 or something like that, but there's an average, and you set yourself apart without saying anything negative about the competition. So Desiree.
Yeah, I think my perspective is a little different since I primarily oversee corporate donors, but one of the touch points that I often see a lot of engagement with is on a monthly basis. I work with our Marcom team to compile all of the media hits that Girl Scouts San Diego received for that month. And I think it's just a great engagement opportunity for donors to see how they could potentially partner with us, what we're doing in the community, and ways that they can potentially be featured in the media as well by partnering with us.
Great, thank you. That's really terrific. I think too, sharing those articles that you're featured in with any donor, is really great. It also kind of is another seal of approval that you're getting from an external source. That's not you saying, look how good we are and we meet our outcomes or we exceed our outcomes. That's awesome. But then, we're also getting this publicity. And so that's a great way to engage. Also around the topic, the passion area, so if you are Armed Services, YMCA, like, where Liza is, if you're sharing, other articles, maybe, or links to articles, for military families, that could be interesting, or other connections. That's something to keep in mind as well. Any other thoughts?
Sharon, Urban Corps doesn't do a ton of events, or, as both of you know, a lot of giving, individual giving as well. Not that you've heard me complain about that ever.
Of course.
But I just got a donation in from somebody who's donated before, and I went to send the letter in the mail, and we have an event in his neighborhood, because of course I can look up, we don't do many events again, but I can look up, so I sent a message to saying, you're down the road from this event, invited him to come. It's like a tree planting event. But in my head, whether he comes or doesn't, I've made the effort to connect, that something's going on and that we'd like to meet him and to come out and be a part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's brilliant. I always say too, it's like you get points for sending the invitation, and if they don't come, because it's still a communication. And I see Marla nodding. So do you want to share anything, Marla?
Well, no, I just thought that the proximity matters. Like, making it easy for donors is really important. We recently got a very nice corporate gift, and I actually called a couple of former board members just to sort of let them know, remember, that was in the works, and we actually secured it. And they really appreciated the personal call and sort of like the inside information. So that was a nice thing.
No, that's great. Yeah, kind of closing the loop, letting them know what happened, back to conveying the impact. Well, great. Well, we're gonna go, thanks.
In
Scott.
terms of in terms of what Lauren said, if the person does show up, the follow-up with that person to, ask them what they thought of the event. And, if they would like to, if there's a place they can come to talk to them, or talking to them by Zoom or a phone call. That follow-up, I think, really is important. And I think it's a step we miss, particularly with big events where you have a lot of people that show up and they really never hear from us again until we invite them to the next one. So that follow-up is really important. Maybe dividing up, if there's multiple people to follow up with, dividing them among your board members or your volunteer committee so that they're getting thanked, and hearing what they thought about the event is helpful for the next event coming forward.
Perfect.
All very time consuming, but very important to retaining them or maybe getting a new donor in that case, but retaining them if they're a current donor.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to go back and share the presentation. Okay, so the next, we've actually kind of already started to do this, but Jeannie, these are your slides.
Yes, right. So I mentioned earlier listening skills, and if you have an opportunity to do a webinar or go to a workshop on listening skills, it will really help you as a development person. Being able to relate to the person personally obviously requires listening skills, so that you're showing not only empathy and being transparent about your organization, but sincerity. I've had a few people share with me how they really appreciated that I showed the sincerity in terms of talking to them about their current situation, what they've done in the past, and going back to a person who can't afford, but actually opening a door to a way that they could give financially at a lesser amount to something that they were really interested in. But I didn't know that until I really listened to their story. And actually, in this case, referring them to where they could give to something that really hit them personally. It says here, favor communications by phone or in person online, which I guess would be Zoom. I'm asking the author of this to clarify that, but my favorite way of communicating, other than calling them up and scheduling an appointment or an email appointment, is to actually meet them in person. If the person's open to that, due to COVID, I know that was cut back a lot, but I found that during COVID, meeting people on Zoom was easier. People didn't have to drive. They didn't have to spend their time in the car. And they also appreciated that they didn't have to open up their home or go to a business to talk to me. But I think it's more about how much communication you have and finding out how the person wants to communicate with you, as opposed to you setting the bar of where you're going to do it or how you're going to do it. Mm-hmm. So meeting where they are, I know that we have all kinds of software out there. And when we first started Zooming during COVID, we had a lot of client volunteers that didn't know how to use Zoom. So we actually set up a workshop to help them do their Zoom and to give them pointers. And now most of them are all using it. And having a phone call or conference calls with a group of people work too. And then I found that oftentimes, particularly with foundations, that just meeting with the foundation representative, but including perhaps the person who started the foundation, or a volunteer, a board member, and this says family members. I've had group meetings with family foundations where a number of the board members, as well as the person that started the foundation, wanted to meet with us collectively. During COVID, just when we had the downturn in COVID, I was able to meet with a group of family members from a foundation, and they ended up giving a very large gift to the organization, and they had never given this large of a gift. They had been giving. They were what you would call retained donors year after year, mostly to operations, but this was actually to a major gift to a major capital program. And I found that by listening to all the family members and their interest in the organization or the lack thereof, really helped us to then make that ask later on. So building donor relations is an ongoing process, and it doesn't happen just with one meeting. There has to be multiple meetings, and actually carrying out those multiple meetings sometimes is with different people in the organization, as well as that one person that has made the difference or has made the decision to make a gift. So when we're doing Zoom meetings, of course, most of you probably have more expertise than I do in this area, but I find that the quality of sound is important. So try out different things. I noticed some of you have a headset or earbuds in. I find myself on a different desktop has really made a remarkable difference than my laptop. I wasn't aware of that until I got one. But the quality of sound is really important, and to test that with either a colleague or a friend to make sure that everybody can hear you before you go on a Zoom that you're actually initiating. The quality of the camera, again, that has to do with not only your system, but also you can upgrade that. I wasn't aware of this until a colleague of mine told me, you know, you have great lighting, but if you would add some lighting to your office setting. And so I have one that's attached to the top of my desktop that really makes a difference in terms of the lighting, but it should be, the lighting should be in front of your face instead of behind you. If you have a bright light behind you in your office, a window, make sure that that's closed so that the lighting is better on your face. The professional setting, I tend to use my Netzel Grigsby background, except when we're on a conference call with our colleagues in the Netzel Grigsby world. We have a monthly meeting. We're asked to use our office background. And then this says 30 minutes max is a ground rules for, I would say, mostly with your donors. We're going to be on this call for an hour and a half. I think it really does depend on the group that you're meeting with, but with donors, they would prefer less rather than more. And at the beginning of your meeting, you should set, we have about 30 minutes to talk with you. Does that sound about right? How much time do you have? And just go over the ground rules in terms of putting your mute on so that the quality is better. Also, sometimes when you're on the screen and you share your video, it adds to the corruption of the video. So sometimes shutting that all down. And we are meeting sometimes with 100, 150 people. It's best to shut off the video when you're screen sharing. We can go to the next. This is just an example of things in terms of what not to do. The first one there, smile and being engaged and looking at the donor instead of looking at yourself. I have a bad tendency to actually look at what I look like instead of looking actually at the donor. So it's really important to remind yourself of that. I know that a lot of people use multiple computers while they're on Zoom so they can access things. But if you're looking at something else or your screen is, this way, I don't know if you can see me, but I'm looking over to the right now, or it might be your left. But I've noticed a lot of people that have multiple screens are actually looking at the wrong screen and not at the people they're talking to. Looking at your own image, as I mentioned. Or as people come in and out of your office or your room at home, make sure that you're trying to pay attention to what you're doing as opposed to that person. And then, just dazing off into the sky there and not really paying attention. I know I've been a big offender of this where I'm doing multiple things. I'm checking my email on another laptop. I'm actually doing some work while I'm listening to a video, and all of those things are deterrent to talking to your donor. It's mainly that first one, smiling, being engaged, looking at the donor and listening, really listening to what they have to say.
Right, exactly. The piece of it's great to multitask, you know, in other situations. But just be careful that donor communications isn't one of them. And we had a couple good in the chat, you know, turning off the self view. That was a really good suggestion that Kristen had. So then, you know, right, you're not looking at yourself. You're not, I'm always fixing my bangs, you know, that kind of a piece. So absolutely agreed. And for those of you who don't know Mitch, this is my very dear colleague who many of you know from our different workshops. And so that we featured him here. So
We rely on him heavily.
we do, exactly. So, you know, we're going to dig into, you know, building the relationship a bit more. And a lot of these points, again, like you really already know, and you know, fairly confident, you know, given that this is the work that you do, but really trying to get to know your donors in new ways, asking new questions, really making the relationship about them. You know, so this is where, you know, a relationship is more one-sided. And, you know, of course, people will ask you about you as well, but as much as you can keep the attention on the donor, that's really what you want to do. And so, you know, finding out about their backgrounds and, you know, homes and interests and family members, you know, that's all really good stuff. And, you know, it may not result in, you know, something right away, but, you know, track it in your database so long as it's not overly confidential. You know, be careful what you're saving, you know, in that regard. But, you know, you want to be, you know, documenting this and asking about their background every time that you meet. And even kind of relating current events to them, you know, in some ways. You know, I mean, I've asked donors, you know, maybe some of the boomer donors, you know, if they were, you know, had served in the military, you know, which often led to some really interesting conversations, whether they had or hadn't, and, you know, or just how things are affecting them. The other thing is I did also just remember the point that I had forgotten a few slides ago, where, you know, if donors aren't able to give at a particular time, that, you know, by listening to them too, that, you know, you're finding out what's going on with them, and you may be able to help. You know, I mean, a lot of us in this world, you know, we are connected to a lot of people in different social service organizations, or hospice organizations, you know, medical, any of that kind of stuff. And I've done a lot of that over my career of just making other introductions to people. It has nothing to do with the gift. It's just, you know, we're out there a lot. And if you don't know somebody, often, you know, you'll know somebody who knows somebody. So that was what I didn't want to forget. Anyway, so we, you know, we do, you know, mention the, you know, tracking the data. Where are you storing it? You know, what are you capturing? You know, how are you reviewing this? You know, kind of like Desiree had said, you know, at Girl Scouts, they're looking at their donor data, you know, you know, monthly even, and at different points in the year to see how things correspond. And, you know, it's kind of a sense of like, how will it work best for your organization? And if anybody has been on Fundraising Fridays, we've had lots of conversations about CRM systems and tracking and things like that. So, you know, we do have resources along those lines if, you know, on this sort of Google Doc that we compile if anybody is interested in that. The question, so this goes back to like the point about asking your way to a gift is kind of like, why are you giving? You know, why do you like us? You know, what about this? You know, and you'll hear the best stories. I mean, that's what this is, you know, my favorite part of, you know, meeting donors, you know, particularly new donors, of, you know, what prompted you to do this? And again, back to San Diego Gives, you know, these are the kinds of things that you could be doing with the donors that come your way. And again, we know that the numbers will probably be high, but you could prioritize it. It doesn't all have to happen the day after the campaign, you know, but just kind of keep some of these in mind. you know, why do you continue to give? That's where you're going to find out all the good information that we were talking about before. You know, I trust you, or I know what to expect when I come visit you. I know, you know, you're not going to take me by surprise. You know, you hear all sorts of things of that you can just make more of, and that you know, really remember, and you know, keep track of. You know, it really shows the donors that you're paying attention and that they are a priority. This last one, I think, is often, you know, really good, especially as you're not, you know, you don't really have maybe the strongest relationship yet of like how, when, how often do you want to hear from us? You will find some people are like, great, fine, whatever you send is fine, you know, and some are like, you know, just a few times a year, or you know, not too many emails, you know, I mean, people have all sorts of, you know, things. And it's a good thing to note, you know, for sure, even if you end up communicating in other ways also. Jeannie?
Another good question is, in terms of our causes, what interests you most about our organization? And sometimes you hear different things than why you can continue to give, or what prompted your first gift. So it's just another question you might get, and think about different ways of asking questions based on the person you're talking to. Not all questions fit all donors.
Right, good point. Yeah, it doesn't, and it doesn't all have to be, you know, who, what, where, when, why, and how. You know, even just the tell me more is great. You know, tell me more about that, or, you know, I'm really curious about, or, you know, I like, also, you know, I've been thinking about you, and da, 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 you know, and that shows that you've been, you know, thinking about them, you know, which is nice. That's, you know, something to kind of, that helps. We have a slide about engaging donors virtually, which really, you know, I think we're doing less of now as we go kind of back and forth with, you know, more in-person events. But you know, so when we started with, you know, with Zoom, you know, this really, I think the slide probably started like 2.5 years ago, where, you know, what are some of the things that you could do using Zoom if, and maybe for the point of today's conversation of, you know, let's say somebody doesn't want to come in, you know, or they're not feeling well, or they can't come in, or something like that, you know, of, you know, the possible virtual tour, or, you know, having calls. I think the board leadership Zoom calls are great. I think those can even still happen, you know, via Zoom. And I think, you know, we're hearing from donors that, you know, they do want to be in person, but yet, you know, it's not so bad to mix it up. And I know Interfaith Community Service was doing a coffee with Greg Angel, the CEO. And it happened by Zoom, and it was great. You know, I think it was really productive for them. And then there are other ways that aren't necessarily virtual, but you're engaging, you know, with, you know, and we've talked about this, asking for other advice, you know, asking for referrals, you know, the peer-to-peer communications, you know, who can they kind of, you know, rally in their networks. And again, to bring up San Diego Gives, this is a big one for crowdfunding campaigns. If you haven't yet maybe considered this for your San Diego Gives campaign, it's a good one. A couple weeks ago in one of the updates, and it's on the nonprofit toolkit that we have online. I'm also happy to send it to anybody again, but Mighty Cause put out a very good information piece on peer-to-peer communications and how to engage it through, how to engage through crowdfunding. So yeah, so we've got that. Jeannie.
Sure. So what do donors like best? And on the side, it says events. It looks like a couple people dancing there. And I think this is in order, I guess, of importance based on the resource that we had. I'm going to just edit it a bit. It says meeting staff, volunteers, and beneficiaries. I think meeting them, but also getting to know them, feeling like they're a part of, they're engaged. And a way to do that is, you know, I'm going to drop down to feeling valued. They need to hear back from you consistently. I always tell people that when we're thanking donors, we need to do it at least 7 times a year in different ways. They need to hear from you. That's kind of the magic number. And it really shows that you care about them. And so they will feel valued. They like to meet other donors, especially at events where they're gathered together, and it's your opportunity to introduce them to other donors, not expect that they themselves are going to network. Usually when you have an event, there's 10 people or 8 people around the table, and it's their table. They know all those people. So you need to have a way for them to interact. Sometimes the networking is the happy hour or the reception time, but you need to get around and make sure people are being introduced to one another, so that they feel comfortable. They feel like they're not the only ones in the room, that they only know a few people. Obviously making it a convenient time and place, that's a mixed message, because convenient for one person is not convenient to another. I know I have some people that only like to do meetings in the morning. I have some people that like to do it after work, after 5. And when I'm meeting with them, I try to meet it at their time that's convenient, and their place, their choice, whether it's Zoom in their office or at home. And sometimes it's just having coffee somewhere. In terms of at an event, the venue and the food seems to attract. I always say when there's the only negative comment from people is about the food, everything else must have been okay. They didn't have anything else to talk about. But it is nice to be able to please your guest and be an innovative at a venue if you're doing a special event. I already talked about being valued, but I think that's number one. I think people continue to like feeling valued, feeling like they're part of, and there's many ways to help them do that. But when they feel valued, then they are going to return to being a donor. And then information about how the gifts are used. We talked about this earlier. This seems to be very important to, I think, people that are younger these days. I'm going to say under 40, although it could be all ages, but they want to know that their gift is being used in the way that actually they suggested it be used, or in terms of the value, the quantitative, qualitative value that their gift is being used for. And if you can explain that in numbers, or you can explain it by a testimonial. I find that testimonials and stories really work with people when they hear that someone's really made a difference. I tend to, when I go to an event and I see a video or I hear a testimonial, if it's really endearing and reaches me where my heart is, I can be drawn to tears, and that could make all the difference in the way that I give my gift or the amount of money that I give personally. Making it interesting, how do they want to donate? It's really important to give your donors options. I'm going to drop down to the blended gift. That seems to be happening more and more. I do a lot of capital campaigns and major gift fundraising with clients, and we're asking for blended gifts. We did just recently ask for a blended gift to a donor that's a consistent donor year after year. And when we ask for our capital gift, we say this, we actually suggested that their gift be much larger, but part of it could go to the annual operations. They actually supported an event, and part of it could go to the capital project. And they came back to us with a large gift saying, you're still going to get what you normally get for an annual gift. And we're going to give this larger gift, the whole amount that we asked for over 5 years. And pretty shocked by that, but by asking the donor how they want to give it and that they can blend it, sometimes benefits you in the long run for a much larger gift. How they want to donate, did people like to donate online? I'm finding that more and more. Make sure that you add, if you can, with your system, to add that they can pay for that administrative fee. The statistics are over 70% of the people, and it might be even higher for you, will donate that extra administrative fee. Make it easy. They are donors that donate online, make it easier so that they're only having to do a couple clicks, more than 3, too much. And make it easy in terms of options, credit cards, checks, and actually bringing the cash in. Select campaigns that resonate with them. So give them some options in terms of how they could donate and what that program source will be. And access to the donor, to the staff, making your staff available so that they can ask the program director for information about the program. And if there are other donors giving to the similar things, suggest that they talk to them. Make sure that you talk to the other donor first, but have them reach out to them and say how important it was that they gave that donation. And then the last one there, create membership programs. I think that this varies from organization to organization, but people do like to be a part of something bigger. And if they know that they're a member with their donation, but just be careful about member benefits versus people who donate more money and don't become a member. So be careful that you plan that program out so that it isn't consistent with your other donations that you're getting, and that people can be a part of something, but that they don't feel left out. So I see in the chat, don't overpromise around membership, and I totally agree with that. We had an arts and cultural program that we were running a capital campaign, and it really was conflicting with how we came up with a recognition with the membership program. And so be careful about what your member benefits are.
Kini, can you share a little about what it is a blended gift?
Well, in my world, although there's a lot of definitions for this, when we're doing capital campaigns, we're always concerned about the annual sustaining gifts that come in for your annual operations. And so we try to focus our campaign timeline around that sustaining fundraising annual campaign, so that if you're doing it in the months of January, February, March, we don't want to be kicking off our campaign community gifts. But when we go out to a potential major donor, we are suggesting to them that they give to the capital campaign an amount, and that we will include their annual giving in that blended gift, or we will ask them to continue to give their annual gift at the same time asking for this capital project. So that's what a blended gift. It could also be where when you're talking to a donor and a consistent donor, and you're wanting to ask them for a major gift, a large major gift, and perhaps over years of giving, whether it's just a major initiative or capital, that they also consider a legacy gift. That could be a blended ask, because you know from their experience of giving that they're very consistent, they're an ongoing donor, they're engaged with the organization. Would you consider making your gift, and are you willing to consider us talking to you about a planned gift? Or it could be an endowment program where you're asking them to give for annual and considering an endowment gift to build the endowment. So blended gifts can be any variation of that. You just need to know the donor really well before you sit down with them to ask for particularly an endowment or a capital gift along with the annual.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to do one more slide, and then we'll open it up to questions. And I know we're hitting the hour mark, and so some folks are needing to pop off. So
Okay, I'll be fast.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, so communications is key. In order to build confidence, in order to be consistent, you have to communicate. So your brand, everywhere you at, it should be consistent. A lot of times when we do an assessment, our organization, NGA does an assessment, we found that the brand is different in their written materials as opposed to the internet, their website, as opposed to perhaps a fact sheet that they put out. So the consistently making sure that your brand is out there in the same way, the same every vehicle that you're using. Communicating the gift impact, this comes up over and over again, but how will your gift make a difference? Share a story about either a family that's been helped, or an individual, a girl in the program, or one of your program constituents that has been impacted by your gift, scholarships. Introduce the beneficiaries and leadership, people who have given large gifts that have agreed that their name can be shared. Share with the donor that these are the people, these are our leadership gifts to our annual campaign this year. They've all given over X number of dollars. If the donor sees that those names are names that they know, they're more likely to give, particularly if they're a new donor. And also we try to share the leadership of a campaign, whether it's annual or capital or endowment. These are the people that have given already to the campaign. And oftentimes it's your board, your committees. And by saying that 100% of our leadership have made a gift to our campaign this year helps, I believe, help other people to make a gift. And convey your advantage. What's the advantage of giving to our organization and our leadership? How the leadership has actually made a difference in terms of your mission. Think of how we can help others. And that thought leadership will, I think, advance your ability to, when you communicate to donors. And then how there's a list there, you may have additional things there. All of these things are good ways, but be consistent and don't over communicate. Don't communicate so often that the donor feels like you're inundating them with information.
Right. Great. So now we are going to do, so the reminders as we close are a couple of points. So, you affect what's in your control. And again, what we've shared are kind of the best of all possible worlds. You just really want to concentrate your efforts. And if it means, segmenting donors, or, trying to focus on, 5 donors a week or something like that, just so long as you're keeping it going and you're really targeting that. And reminding them of why they want to, why they gave to you in the first place, and remind them, not just by reminding them, but through your actions, through your stories, through the communications, through the other people that you introduce them to, really focusing on their needs. We did throw in there, we miss you for the emotionally subscribed of, we'd love to have you more engaged. That's, kind of an even bigger conversation. We didn't really talk about that as much, but I'm going to stop sharing. And the remaining slides have our contact information, our email addresses for those who don't have them. And you are very welcome, to reach out if we can be of help at all. And in terms of San Diego Gives, there's also a bunch of great workshops that are still going to be happening. So keep an eye on that, as well as, the office hours and, the marketing support. We still, the next 3 weeks or so, we still have lots going on. And I know we've had a couple of questions here that we had actually, even going back, Liza had one of the best way to, what is the best way to share impact information? And I think, and then also to like Marla's question just now too, of the optimal time of year to share your organization's impact. So it's kind of like, what's the best way? And is there timing that comes into play? What do you think, Jeannie?
Well, I think some of it has to do with your calendar year, your fiscal year. So typically in a July 1 to June 30, we try to get the annual report out by May, so that that information is available as we start our new year, July to June. So think of your fiscal year, and there are many varied, and try to get that information out the month before you're actually starting into your new year, so that when you're starting your plans, you're planned for your campaign annual capital endowment, whatever you're doing, to make sure that you have those. That information from your annual report, to me, can be narrowed down into what I would call bullets that you use in a presentation. So the key things that you have impact on, 5 or 6 things that you consistently say over and over and over again. One of those things should be that you have 100% board giving, 100% leadership, or you can use the word leadership, because that invigorates other people to give. Having said that, they're looking for your impact numbers of, how many kids you've served, how many kids have gotten scholarships, how many kids got backpacks. I'm using kids, but it can be adults. How many, disabled adults have learned to swim because of your money. Those types of things. People want to hear that their donation has made a difference. Those are the impact that is in your report. Be consistent with those. I've had organizations where the report says one thing and their new information that they're giving out says something else. That inconsistency can cause a lack of confidence. It can also cause people to feel uncomfortable about giving to you because they're not sure that their money is actually going. They'll start questioning everything if they see inconsistency in numbers. So I hope that answers. There's no best time. There's no best time to do a campaign. I know because of my Y background, we always did our capital or our annual drive in January for membership. It's because everybody wants to get fit, right? So it fit with that. We always did our current support campaign. As soon as January is over, we hit it in February, March, April. And as I got long in the tooth in the Y, we shortened our time. So we only did it over 4 weeks. Sometimes that impetus that this is the time you give, obviously you take donations all year, but this is the time that we're doing our sustaining drive over a short period of time. I found that when we do surveys, the shorter the time you give to people, the better your results are, because the longer you give, the more, it just drags out. And that survey information in terms of your impact, I think is really valuable information. What do you hear from your donors? Make sure then you address those things when you're doing your impact numbers. Lisa, have a question?
Yeah, do you mean when you're talking about the shorter time for the survey, do you mean the time in between, program, like a shorter survey, or like time in between your ask and the donation?
Both. Shorter amount of questions and the amount of time you give them to respond.
I would also add too that, here, we're a Jewish organization. And so we have aligned things with the Jewish calendar also, which has mixed things up a bit. And you don't have to be a Jewish organization to do that. But if there are certain times of the year that are meaningful to your organization, like, I don't know, Girl Scouts, is there, the month of the young woman, or is there, the month of the military family, or things like that. There's thousands of months. Once I tried to look up all the months, because I was looking at doing giving opportunities. This is when I was at the Jewish Community Foundation. And I never got a definitive list, because it was like, there are multiple. So you really could probably find a lot of these, really any time. Or if there are, particular, I don't know, I'm looking at you, Marla, I don't know if there are particular like nature things, that are happening, or, or even like with Urban Corps with their tree planting. So Earth Month, there you go.
Another thing I found, back to thanking your donors or investing in thanking them, is, we have these grandparent days, which is, I know, a Hallmark thing, but still there are grandparents that either their grandchildren don't think of them or they never hear from them. And I found that 7 times a year, thanking people, of recognizing things like that, whether it's Valentine's Day or Grandparents' Day or whatever it is, to pull those donors. Obviously you have to have that information, you have to know it. That's the collecting of data. But if you can reach out to people on days like that, it really makes a big difference. And I chose Grandparents' Day only because that's something that I'm very well invested in as a grandmother, but as a Nana. But having said that, I don't hear from all my grandchildren. If I heard from an organization that said Happy Grandparents' Day, that would make a big difference to me.
Mm.
So I'm just telling you from my perspective, but you can think up those days and turn them into a way to thank your donors.
Mhm. That's a great thought. What other questions did we pretty much get? Anything else you guys want to ask or share?
How about, did you learn anything new today? Or was it all old information?
Yeah.
Anybody learn anything new? Not really?
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe next time we'll take it up a notch. I don't know. Okay. So, Liza, yeah.
I was just gonna say that I liked the point about having 5 or 6 things to share consistently over and over again, about the organization. That was something I hadn't thought of or known before.
Right.
So that's new.
Yeah, well, and to that point too, before I go on a donor meeting, I'm always, or even to an event, probably event that's a better way to frame it, is just, like, what are the key things that I want to be sure to share? If people are like, what's going on? Like, I have one this afternoon, evening, and rather, and so for me, it's been better to just like take some time before and actually like really prepare, hear the top couple things that are going on. And that helps me avoid the whole like, I'm really busy. Aren't we all busy? That kind of thing where it's just kind of like stuff, and then you miss your opportunity. But to have it, have them be kind of tight pieces that way.
We used to call those cheat sheets. We'd
Right.
make a list of things that we really wanted to discuss with the donor and try to focus on what they wanted to share. But in terms of our questions, always thinking about how can we get them to share by asking these questions. And it's different for different donors, obviously, depending on how well you know them or how well you don't know them.
Right, for sure. Well, great, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this time. Really appreciate it. And we know everybody is super busy. We hope it was some value add, even if it wasn't new, some good reminders of things. And, I always like to say, we're all doing the same things over and over, and we never quite know exactly what's going to hit. So, I think just kind of briefing ourselves on that can be really helpful. As I said in the beginning, we will share and post the recording as well as the slides. And I'm going to stop recording now. And